Morning. How's it going? I feel like my light is extra bright today. I'm not sure what's going on with that. Secretly okay with it. Right on. So, it is morning. It is a very kind of white slash gray day over here. Um, I would love some sunshine. We haven't had any for quite some time. I'm getting a little bit squirrely with the way that we're just constantly gray at the moment. This is kind of the hardest part of winter for me because you kind of have the build up before Christmas where things are great and you're super excited. And then post Christmas, things just get intense and it gets a little bit harder to wait for spring because it's gray and hard. So I'm trying to not be too grumpus this morning. Yesterday was Nicole's birthday, and that went really well. Can we focus here? Focusing is good. Better. Right on. We had epic cake, and we played D&D, and that was awesome. So now it's kind of back to the grind again, as it were, which is alright with me. So today, just working on this map again for the patrons on Patreon. And going on that way. So yeah. Good morning, Holmes. How's it going? My intention had been to figure us out how to VoIP for today, and I've been researching it, but it's not totally making sense to me just yet. So hopefully we can do more about that this week and get it sorted out. Alright, so my hand is looking kind of pixelated to me on the screen. Myrna, can you tell me if it is? I feel like this is the digital equivalent of a mic check. Right on. Friday Fave's email is important. I look forward to getting it. It is, but it's going in and out. Can we drop this a little bit? Would that make a difference? I think that's about as good as I can get it. Okay. Well, if it gets really super annoying, tell me and we'll restart the stream. In the meantime, let's draw some mountainy things. Well, I guess we're doing trees today. Acres and acres of tiny trees. So Myrna got this super cool tool from Amazon that I really want. And it helps draw circles. And I know you're thinking, like, that's probably just like a protractor compass. But it's not. It's just, I don't even really know how to describe it. It's like a circle that has a bunch of little circles in it that's kind of somehow combined with like those spirograph kits that you got as a kid. And I'm really into it. I think it's fantastic. And I want one. So I'm secretly hoping that the next time we do an Amazon order for the 3D printer or something, I can just sneak that in there. Because that would be cool. Turns out that Dave has saved up enough to buy the resin printer that he's been looking at now. For those of you who don't know, my husband is absolutely addicted to 3D printing now. We got our 3D printer back in October. He's kind of turned it into a bit of a side business printing stuff for other people because where we are, there's no 3D printer on demand. So he decided once this actually looked like it was going to be something that was going to run all the time, that he wanted to get a resin printer to do higher quality stuff like minis because there's a pretty strong D&D community here. And he's saved up to do that. So he's ordered it and it will get here next Monday. So that will be super exciting. I'm actually really looking forward to that because we backed a bunch of Kickstarters for 3D print files that I've been just sitting on the files because we're going to do them on our 3D printer, which is a PLA printer. And then Dave was like, I'm planning on getting a resin one, so why don't we just wait until I get the resin one, then do all of the minis on the resin one. And I was like, this is an excellent plan. So I'm super excited it's going to get here because that means I will finally get my army of beautiful dragons that I backed. Super stoked about that. So yeah, otherwise not a whole lot going on over here. I was saying that I made an epic cake for Nicole's birthday. It was delicious, and I had the wrong size tart ones, so there's now enough to make like an entire second tart. So that is kind of awesome. We made birthday lasagna because that's the tradition around here. The general rule of thumb is that your birthday lasts as long as the lasagna leftovers do. So that's kind of fun. And yeah, otherwise I've got up on the go. It's not quite at a stage that I'm ready to start showing it to people yet, so that's why I'm working on this one during the live stream and not his. But hopefully that will be ready to rock soon. It's going to be another watercolor map, so we're going to have some fun with doing the water wash and all of that. Yeah, she did, Myrna. I have a picture, but I can't show it on the screen because I've already given it away. But I drew Nicole her character Winnie as a birthday present. And last year I drew her character Tilly. So that was pretty cool. She really did. So that was pretty awesome. The expression on her face made me really happy. Now Gord wants one of his rangers, so we'll add that to the queue and get it done eventually. There's like a bounce in this piece of paper today that is just slightly disconcerting. Don't really know where it's coming from. I wonder if it didn't get stored perfectly flat. It's a bit like drawing on a trampoline. It's funny how like the more you work with a certain type of paper, the more aware of those nuances you get. Just kind of like, oh, okay, interesting. So I was posting an in-progress shot of this to one of my mapping groups, and somebody I think it was Ben, pointed out that this lake makes no sense in terms of the geography. Yeah, paper spirits, right? I think so, obviously. So I'm gonna have to work out what to do with that lake up there. So we'll figure it out. It might be just turn into like one of the random geography features. I had somebody in the map group be like, "Why is this a giant swirl?" And I was like, "It just is. What are the dots?" Well, I don't know. Sometimes I just put interesting things on the map so that people have little cues that they can use to riff off of for storytelling or role-playing experiences. Sound like I've eaten a bunch of gravel today. Sorry, guys. More coffee. Coffee will help. This is my plan. So I'm just trying to pay attention to where I want the forests to go. In a rather Bob Rossian sense of things. I kind of like this new method of doing trees. I'm just doing tiny little ticks in different pen weights, following what I think are like the curves of my hills and stuff. And I think in terms of giving the impression of scale, it's a lot more accurate than my usual trees. And I like the elegance of that. I just find it visually more appealing because it's a bit more velvety. That said, it definitely has a different aesthetic than all of the spikiness of my usual trees. So kind of getting used to that and playing it out, seeing how it works. I don't find it really takes too much more time than the old method. Honestly, it might even take slightly less time than the old method. So that's a relief because the other one is labor intensive. I like it, which is why I keep doing it. But it's definitely not something that you can just zip through. There have been so many really great city maps in my mapping group lately that I'm kind of tempted to try doing an urban map for the first time. Have I seen the beauty gurus on YouTube who are doing Bob Ross tutorials? No, I have not. One of the guys I follow on Instagram, I think he goes by Lithium Snow, just did Botticelli's Birth of Venus on his throat the other day, though. That was really pretty. I was just like, okay, wow, you have some mad skills with powdered eyeshadows. Are they like Bob Rossing in terms of like personality or Bob Rossing in terms of style, Myrna? Because I don't know that anybody can really duplicate Bob Ross. I'm not going to go so far as to say that it would be blasphemy or anything, but he is pretty unique. They follow his instructions. Oh, interesting. Yeah, that would be something to see. If I just search like Bob Ross makeup, will it come up? I wonder what you're doing with makeup that all of a sudden you're like, you know what would make a ton of awesome sense right now? Bob Ross. Yeah, if you could just send me a link, that'd be super cool. If you post links in the chat, can other people in the chat see them? I'm sorry, that probably sounds like a ridiculous question, but you know how not technologically adept I am. Somebody else just joined us a moment ago. Hello. Good morning. Well, it's morning here. I'm not sure what time it is where you are, but happy day. Thank you for joining us. See, all these things I'm learning about YouTube only while we are live. That's kind of funny. You'd think it would remain part of the archive forever because it's part of that ongoing conversation. But perhaps that's just the way my brain works and not how the real world works because that happens a fair amount. I'm like, oh yeah, this should be obvious. And other people are like, no, Shay, that is not obvious. Which is fair. There was an interesting study that I was reading about that said that people with depression tend to be more realistic about things than people without or who are overly optimistic. And it was something that I could really relate to because I deal with swings of both of those sides of things. It was like, yeah, I think I'm probably more realistic when the depression is bad, but I'm happier when I'm feeling optimistic. And Dave was like, well, most depression kind of precludes being happy. And I was like, yeah, that is true. Unfortunate, one of the diagnosable aspects of it, but I like believing that the world is not inherently evil. There's something reassuring about it. I'm gonna need to come and get some more microns, Myrna. These ones are starting to get a little beat up. Somebody in the mapping group, again, I think it was Ben, was saying that he'd really like to see this map in color. And I'm interested in that idea, like really, really interested in doing this one in colors. So I think what's going to happen is I'm going to do it up in black and white and scan it in black and white like I usually do for the Patreon maps. And then I think I'm going to do it with Copic. I can't do it in watercolor because I drew it on Bristol on the vellum, and which will buckle as soon as I add watercolor paint to it. So it's going to have to be marker, but I don't think that will necessarily be a bad thing. So, because I'm curious to see what this style of trees is going to do with color on top of it. I think it'll look really amazing. So, stoked about that. I think it's going to be cool. There's a few more people who have joined us. Hello, good morning. Well, morning where I am. I keep saying that. So yeah, last night was game night. We played in the campaign that Dave is running. We finally like connected with the river that we've been searching for the last few games, so that was really exciting. And soon we will be going to a temple full of Yanti who have stolen our friends. So it'll be daunting to try and get our friends back from them. We're doing a lot of terrain crafting for that setup, so that there's actually like a really cool temple for people to go through, which has been a lot of labor so far, but like I think the results are worth it. People seem to be enjoying the tabletop game more just because there's things to look at. It's not just theater of the mind. And like we did our entire Tiamat campaign theater of the mind. I don't think it was really a problem for anybody, but it definitely I noticed people are bringing out their phones less often now that there's actually stuff on the table to look at. So I thought that was kind of cool. So we made a palisade for a town. Sorry, coffee break. That we encountered last night, which was really cool. And then, yeah, we're working on this temple for, I don't think it'll be quite next week, maybe the week after. But that part will be fun as well. I've been doing my best to like some of the kind of mass troops that I have. The skeletons are what I'm working on right now. It's different to batch paint things when you're painting miniatures. Like, I have a whole new respect for people who paint entire, like, Warhammer armies and have everything look so consistent. That is a skill, and it is a skill that I do not have. But with more practice, I'll get better at it. I think I like painting minis where it's not hypercritical that they all match. Just kind of keeps the process fresh and fun for me. Hi, John! To make the buildings. Which buildings are you referring to, darling? Oh, for the crafting. I'm sorry. I have not had enough coffee today, apparently. We're using extruded polystyrene. So house insulation foam, if you're from colder climates, like the pink stuff or the blue stuff. And we're doing a lot of cutting with electric tools like the Proxon hot wire cutter. We started following a guy named Black Magic Craft on YouTube. He's from Winnipeg, actually, so he's Canadian, which was kind of cool. And he does a whole bunch of really cool foam crafting for D&D. And that was kind of what got us into it. So the buildings are doing largely extruded polystyrene, and then clad in different things. So like the palisade that we've done is covered in meticulously cut barbecue bamboo skewers for making like kebabs. Dave has been doing just an incredible job of very patiently assembling that. He's made a wood plank floor for it that's popsicle sticks. Like, that was what he spent his Christmas break doing, and it made him happy, so I just let him go to it. We have an inn that we're working on right now where we're making all of the bricks like by individual brick and assembling it that way. I've seen a really cool tutorial recently where BMC made stones out of the polystyrene and used those on a hut, and I really really like that. The aesthetic of it was awesome, and he actually used like drywall plaster to plaster them down. So you got like a legit mortar thing, like not just paint creating the imitation of it. And I was super into that. So I think that we have an inn that we're working on right now that I want to try and do that particular metric with. I think it'll be fun. I did a river and waterfall setup a little while ago for the Entmoot, which was just like last week or the week before. And we used silicone caulking to create the water effects on the river and on the waterfall that I did. And using the silicone was really interesting. I quite enjoyed how like realistic it looked in terms of the water because it's so reflective and shiny and refractive. So I like the idea of starting to integrate more materials that have kind of fluidish bases like the caulking and the plaster and stuff like that. There's some really incredible terrain builders on YouTube, and that's kind of become something that we watch a lot together just to get inspiration and get an instruction and stuff like that. I'm really enjoying having a hobby where we're doing stuff. Dave is an avid video gamer, and I'm one of those people, fortunately, that likes to watch other people play video games, but there's a limit to how fascinating that gets. Hey Brian, how's it going? Welcome, welcome. We're talking about D&D terrain because I was talking about the stuff that we were building for game because it was game night last night. I'm trying to remember like where my geography is for this section because this is a map. I showed this last week, but I'll show it again this week. That I'm kind of working off of a pre-existing idea of what the terrain looks like. So I'm like, I could fill this all in with forests. Oh wait, I should probably not do that. There are other things going on. So, yes. I think we're gonna trade pens here for a bit. How about this one? I don't know if you guys can hear Saxon in the background. He's on the little love seat that's in my office just snoring away. Funny hound. At least he's not barking. I am such a fan of him not barking. Ever since we had Chimo over the holidays, he just barks way, way more. It's kind of the only negative side effect that we had from having another dog stay with us for a couple weeks. They get along really well now, though. Like, that part is really great. I don't know if I like those dots right there. No, not really. Okay. We will just not do that again. It's kind of the great thing about working, just giving yourself permission to play with things. You can be like, I'm gonna try this, and it works, or yay, and if it doesn't, I'm just not gonna do that again. That's totally fine. I found quite some time ago that I am more willing to experiment with different types of pen stroke and stuff like that if I give myself just like straight up permission, like this doesn't have to be good. And as long as I'm thinking about it that way, then I'm okay with it not having to be good. As soon as I like don't have that kind of mental dialogue with myself, I get super into my head and very peer pressury about, well, this needs to be like perfect. It's taken me a long time to kind of come to grips with the fact that I'm going to notice everything in my work that is not what I intended it to be. But most people looking at my work will not see that stuff. They're going to see the stuff that delights them or that really catches their attention. And in a map as complex as this, then, you know, you're dealing with stuff, but it's not stuff that, for the most part, other people are going to be paying attention to. Right, Brian? It's totally a thing. It totally is. I was telling everybody before you got here, Brian, about this super cool circle thing that Myrna found on Amazon for drawing circles, ostensibly. I'm thinking of it for like compass roses and cool stuff like that. It's not a compass and it's not a protractor. It's literally like a circle that almost looks like it's part of one of those spirograph sets that we had when we were kids, or that I know for sure I had one. They were pretty common toys when I was growing up. So I'm super curious about them and I can't wait to get my hands on one because I think they're going to make my life a lot easier. Circles are hard, which sounds like a very obvious statement, but it's quite true. There are a few templates now that I have that just make life easier. Like I was on a call with a client for a bit of art for the book that he's got coming out, and we were just doing some design work on the fly. Like I'd done up a spec sheet, he was looking it over, and he's like, "Okay, I kind of like this, I kind of like that." And I was like, "Well, what if we combine them?" And I just kind of whip out my circle template, and it made me look so like professional and official. And I was all about that. I was like, "Yeah, this is awesome." Never be afraid to get the tools that make your job easier. And also never get hung up on the tools. You can make art regardless of whether you've got everything you think you need. A lot of people get like tool paralysis where they're like, I have to have this thing or I'm never going to be able to achieve it. And in some cases, yeah, you're right. But in most cases, probably not. If you don't have access to the immediate stuff, you're just going to have to get more creative to achieve what you want. That's totally the truth, Brian. That, yeah, when you're just having fun, they look better. Absolutely. I don't know if you guys follow Runehammer on YouTube at all. Hankrin Vernale. He's kind of one of the ones that really inspired me to start live streaming because he live streams or was live streaming drawing sessions for quite a while. And in my brain, he's kind of like the Bob Ross of role playing art. Like he's just so soothing and so encouraging to listen to. I'm a huge fan of just putting him on in the background and listening to him talk while I work. And he was talking about how like if there's not joy in the process, then you're not going to get the kind of quality that you want because it reads differently to an audience. Like an audience can tell when you're actually having a good time, because you're everything is just a little bit freer and more vibrant. I don't disagree with him at all. Like we were talking about flow states a couple weeks back, and those are really cool too. I think my best art that I've ever made has been a flow state where I'm just in it to enjoy the process, and it kind of takes me outside of myself, and I love that. It's as close to magic as I think I'm ever gonna get. He goes under the YouTube handle Runehammer. He uses the name Hankerin Furinail, which I think is kind of. But yeah, his streams are amazing. Honestly, I aspire to do what he does because it's just he's a brilliant artist. He's very humble and he's an incredible philosopher in the school of life. So one day I'm gonna grow up and try to be him, which would be super cool. So I'm just kind of minding my coastline here with a bunch of little dots. This area is kind of it's been clear cut in the scope of the story and converted into like farming fields. So I'm just trying to keep it flat looking and kind of level. I may put some hills in here eventually, but there's definitely not a ton of woodland. So more than anything, I'm just kind of elaborating the coast to make it look like this portion of the map has been considered. I have no problem leaving blank spaces on my map. There's like a thing that you have to pay attention to is kind of your white-black balance as you go. Making sure that there's not too much white space and not too much black space because your eye will automatically just go and hover in those spaces and try to make more sense than what's there. So making it look like you've considered all of your spots, whether or not they're totally filled in, is important. because you don't have to have them completely filled in. Sometimes that just makes things too cluttered and too busy. I know a lot of people get down on stippling, but honestly, I find it super relaxing. I've always been this way though. There have been some really awesome city maps, like I was saying before, in the mapping group lately, so I'm kind of tempted to bust out of my traditional landscape kind of mode and try something that's a more urban setting and see what I come up with. The first few are probably going to be terrible, but that's acceptable. You don't get any better without starting somewhere. Stippling drives you nuts, Brian? That's fair, it's not for everybody. There are certain things that other people can do that I'm just like, nope, hard pass. Alright, that section's looking pretty good. So I think we'll come down here. So these trees are intentionally being left really, really large because they're a plot point in my story. This is where the guardian groves are. You can't even see them on the thing. Hang on, let me zoom in. Do. There we go. That's a little more reasonable. So these trees, right here. Why are we slashed out for light today? Like, that is really surreal. We've never had this problem before. I wish I understood what was happening with that. Can I turn down the light? Will that make a difference? Hey, check it out. That makes a difference, right? I think so. Okay, cool. We'll go with that for now. One day I will become technically accomplished, you guys. It will be amazing. But yeah, these trees are intended to be huge. In my head, they're based on the California redwoods, like General Sherman, which I believe is more than 300 feet tall. I'm sure you've seen pictures. They're the ones that people like drive their cars through, and you can stretch like 50 around the base of one to try and deal with the circumference of it. I love those trees. I find them hugely inspiring. And so in my story, they've taken on kind of a sacred aspect. And there are groves of them at various points around the coast. And they are like common points for forms of elemental and druidic magic, which is partly why the trees grow to the size that they grow. So it's important for me to kind of denote them on the map because those are relevant for the story. And they're also just an interesting visual addition for people who maybe aren't familiar with the story, which is most people, if they want to use this map for role-playing stuff or for their own writing prompts kind of thing. So I've been thinking more and more about what's to the east because that's the whole point of this map. Like I'm starting in the west because I know what's here, but I need to go into the east because that is really the point. So I know that there's going to be a desert. I know that we're going to be dealing with a rain shadow on this side of the mountains. So there's going to be probably still more forest in between these two stretches, and then there will be some here, but not very much because when you have water coming off a coast, especially if there's mountains right near the coast, it's going to butt up against those mountains and it's going to drop there. It's not really going to get past that peak. You'll get some, but it won't be a lot. So on this side, it's going to be a lot drier. And I kind of need to make a decision about what dryness is going to look like in that context. I know that over on the far end, like kind of over here, there's actually a full on desert, the red desert. And that's where the Scourge is hanging out with their magic stealing cactus. So I know that I need that. And I also know, like, I know roughly what their travel path is going to be. So this will probably be more arid as well because they find it easier to travel up from the south. So having that kind of narrative information is super useful to me in this context. But it's useful. It doesn't completely inform everything. I still need to make some decisions about that. So it'll be fun. I am not complaining. It just still is building my confidence to work on this side of the map first. That's another thing about making art. Don't ever be afraid to start at the stuff that makes you feel confident about the process. Because the process is what's going to get you through. Even if you think your work is absolutely terrible, if you trust the process, you're probably going to get somewhere that you like by the end. I was really not sure about these trees when I started doing them. I'm like, oh, they're overly simple. They're not fancy enough compared to my other usual trees. And when I posted it to the mapping group, I think it was Linda, said something highly encouraging. And she's like, no, they look fine. And I was like, oh, good, because in my head, they were terrible. It's super useful to have people who are not in your head to be like, nope, you're doing okay. You don't need to stress about this because we are always our own worst critics. Always, always, always. Yeah, they really are more of a texture. You're totally right, Brian. And that was the whole thing for me is I was like, well, my other trees are cool, but they really are too big for the scale that I'm trying to work at. And so I honestly think like a full-on stippling is probably even more to scale than what these little line ticks are. But then I wouldn't be able to use actual stippling to like delineate my coastlines and stuff like that. So some of it is just sheer practicality, like what kind of marks can I make at this scale with the tools that I have. And like to be fair, I don't want to be stippling with a 0.003 Copic. That's like stabbing things with a needle, and even I have my limits. This is a 0.005, but a 0 is just exceptionally tiny. I don't even think you'd be able to register that there was a shading around this edge with that unless I spent forever doing it. So we'll just reserve that for other periods of time where such fine lines are actually required. But I like the texture of it. Like I've always been really inspired by there's a gondola in Jasper, which is near where I live, like with only a couple of hours away, where you can go up the side of a mountain in a beautiful little cart, and you can just look at this valley. And I think it's Myrna's at the Valley of the Five Lakes that's near Jasper that you can see from the gondola. I think you might remember. And you just can see the trees as this kind of velvet phenomenon. And I really love that look. Like, that's something that I grew up with the valleys near my home. It's kind of ironic to me that such spiky trees as pines are velvety when you zoom far enough out from them. I just find that amusing. So But yeah, I love the texture of it. It just makes me happy. It's also helpful that because the like I was saying before about the black white balance, like this gives a nice darkened aspect to it, which makes the mountains just stand up in better relief and gives a better contrast to like the areas that are not so dark. It's kind of a relief for the eye. That's cool. You don't have to know. That is acceptable. I'm kind of in love with these lumpy hills that are down here. Normally my hills are a lot more regular, but these ones ended up being really kind of misshapen, and I dig it. They're kind of my new favorite hill type. So I think I'm gonna continue trying to work with them. They look a little bit like potatoes, and I am okay with that. So what's everybody else working on right now? I know, Myrna, you said you were working on your newsletter. Spuds, yes. Sorry, Brian, I've been looking down at the paper. Hang on, I'll give you a close-up so you can see your spuds. Where are they? How much closer do we need to get, phone? There we go. Those guys. Seriously, why are we so washed out today? That's really bothering me. I'm using the same lights as normal. I am confused about what is happening. So I know that there's some more little wooded hills over here. Also, Brian, I feel like I have to apologize to you about the "you were fried" comment. I thought it was funny, but if it wasn't, you can clearly recognize yourself in them. You goon. I'm sure we'll forgive you, Myrna. It's totally alright. I hope that the ravening hordes at the grocery store are not, in fact, ravening. Drive safe. I don't know how the roads are in the city. They're not good here. You like the fried comment? Oh, good. I kind of thought that you would, but I wasn't totally sure. That Myrna, she's pretty awesome. I'm a huge fan. I'm super grateful today that the guys who are renovating next door do not have a truck stuck on my lawn. That was an issue yesterday or Tuesday? I don't remember now. And I was really worried it was going to happen during the stream today because that would not be as fun as it could have been. It was just so loud. Like, they were clearly stymied about this truck being stuck. We have a culvert, I'm assuming is the right word, like water drainage system in our front yard, so there's a fairly deep ditch, and they were trying to haul a trailer out. And obviously hadn't seen it because the snow blows in there, and yeah, it was not pretty. They were unimpressed. Couldn't really blame them for that. It was making my dog a little bit crazy though. He was like, "What's the deal? Why are there people?" I was like, "I'm sorry, Saxon, I have no idea." I don't know if any of you who are hanging out today write or not. That was how I got into map making, was I needed maps for the novel that I'm working on. And I was rereading something that I wrote, I don't know, 6 or 8 weeks ago now. And I was actually kind of impressed with myself. Like, it's kind of always the case for me with art, but I'm starting to learn that it's also the case for me with writing. That distance really lets me know what I did that was successful and what I did that was really not. Art is a little bit more immediate because I'm doing it in a much more public sphere where people can be like, hey, this is working or it's not working. Writing is still a really private activity for me right now. So getting that feedback from other people isn't happening to nearly the same degree. So rereading this piece, and I was actually quite happy with it. It was just a good feeling. It was like, okay, cool. I am perhaps developing a new skill muscle in that direction, which was great. So why not really anymore, Brian? Is it a time thing? Are you finding that it's just not useful to your players? Have you kind of fallen out of love with the process? Do I like to keep a schedule for writing? I do. I wish that I had a better one right now, though. Honestly, because I'm doing so much more commission artwork, my writing has really taken a backseat to it. And in some ways, that's great because, self employment, you work while there's work to be had. So I definitely cannot complain about the love that I'm getting in that direction. But it does take a little bit more balancing to try and make sure that my personal projects and the stuff that really refreshes me as an artist and as a writer is still happening. So I've actually started doing something a little bit different in 2019, and I'm taking my mornings for myself now. Dave comes home for lunch every day. That's the one of the beauties of us living on base is he can just zip home when he's not out in the field, and we can have lunch together. So my mornings, from when he goes to work to when he comes home for lunch, I use for myself. So that includes the live stream, but writing, any personal art that I'm working on. And then my afternoons are my commission time. And it's extended how long it takes me to get my commissions done now, just because I'm only working on them part of the time during the day. But I honestly find that I'm happier and I'm more creative just because other needs of mine artistically are getting met. So I remember it wasn't last year. I wasn't able to do NaNoWriMo this past November. Just too much was going on. But the year before I did NaNoWriMo and I busted it out. Like I did almost 110,000 words that month. I wasn't doing anything else. I wasn't working out of the home or anything. Wasn't doing any commission art at that point. So it felt really amazing to kind of hit that number just because I haven't written like that since doing my master's thesis. But it also kind of set the bar unreasonably high, I think, perhaps, about what productivity is supposed to look like. Because I was like, oh, that's just productivity. No, actually, that's kind of exceptional, and I need to credit that and then not expect it from myself all the rest of the time. Real life has to happen. So yeah, it was surreal, Brian. Like honestly, and I feel like I probably haven't even written that in the entire last 6 months. Like I think if I've cracked 10 or 15,000 words since November of this year, that would be a lot. So that's part of the reason why I'm trying to take my mornings again because I want this project. Like it's important to me. I don't want to give it up. So, but I love the world building part of it. I absolutely do. It makes me super happy. And the sketch that I was rereading this morning was literally just a little side thing that I had written to explore part of the cultural milieu of my main city. So, made me happy. The expectations, that's what ruined it. Yeah, it's so more of a style thing then, hey? Because you mentioned academic writing. I suppose, like, that depends a lot on what kind of academic writing you're reading. Because, like, there's some really not dry academic writing in my field, which was hugely inspiring for me as an academic writer. But also, I write fantasy stuff as kind of an amalgam of styles, like, similar to what I've read. I find I'm finding my own voice now. Like since I started trying to write Halcyon, I can definitely tell like when I'm aping someone else or when I'm writing as myself, which is a great thing to be aware of. I think we all start somewhere in terms of like trying to figure out what our own voices sound like. Yeah, that makes sense. I'm assuming your sciences then? Because I'm definitely humanities. My degree, my undergrad was anthropology. You're in linguistics. Okay, so yeah, precision is even more important then. Uh, for sure, for sure. My undergrad was in anthropology, and my master's was in religious studies. So, studying the reasons why and how religion exists as a social phenomenon. It was a non theological program, so I wasn't particularly interested in pushing ideas of what religion was in terms of a transcendental thing. I was much more interested in more the anthropology or sociology of religion. Like, why is it useful to humans? And how does it get used in what context and for what reasons? Because I think there's a lot to examining different structures of unconscious power in our society. And religion is a particularly interesting case for me because as soon as you add the idea of a transcendental power, which a lot of religions do in terms of having gods or external forces, you're basically giving those organizations a bit of a pass in some ways for certain kinds of behavior that we monitor very, very closely in other situations through social ideologies like law or gender. And so I find that a really, really interesting thing to try and be aware of. But there were a lot of writers who had a very personal slant. Like there's been a bit of a renaissance for writing in the humanities, I would say, with the postmodern shift because you're now allowed to use like first person pronouns and you can state your opinion. You just have to back it up with citations. I would argue that a lot of humanities research is actually a kind of ancestor worship because you can say whatever you want. You just have to back it up with the people who have gone before you in order to have any form of legitimacy. I'm really happy with the progress that we're making today. Now, do I go and finish all the little islands or do I go and start playing with the forests and the valleys? That is the question. I think we better finish the islands because we're there. So, I think I'm gonna need to carry some of this forest down here now. There we go. That's a little better. When you kind of just unfocus your eyes and you're like, there's not enough black down here. That's when it kind of, you just go back and you add a little bit of dark and things rebalance and you can carry on. It's pretty awesome. Put a little bit down here. A little bit over here. So this island is a wandering island. It moves. It moves slowly, but it moves. And the elves know that because the elves live long enough to know that the island is not there anymore. But the humans don't know that because the humans don't live long enough to know that. There's a few of them on the map. And there's that one, this little one, these two, and this big one. So that's been kind of fun to try and narrate. I think that there are dryads of different persuasions on all of the different wandering islands. I was kind of thinking, like, what would they be like? Would they have, like, cultural and even, like, racial variations from being on islands and not on the mainland? I was thinking of, what did they call it? Homo habitus? Back of a turtleoise. I squint. Yes, I do squint. I'm not sure why they move. I have this kind of thought of them being a semi-sentient creature. There is the Zartan in Dungeons and Dragons, and I love the idea of that. I don't really want to rip it off because, you know, I'd like to find my own reason. But yeah, similar kind of deal. Also, I feel like having turtles now would be a wonderful homage to Terry Pratchett because I love him. He was an absolute genius. But also, I'm never ever gonna handle that as perfectly as him he did. So like, why? No point stepping on someone else's amazingness. So I have a giant lake on this island that is right here. That's in place. There's some hills here, so we'll put our trees on hills. I think we'll do that with a slightly smaller pen. Right? He's just, oh, so good. So good. I kind of wish that, like, just going back to talking about having a writing schedule and stuff, I kind of wish I had a writer's group. I feel like it would be a little bit easier to stay on track with a group of people who are like, hey, we're expecting to see something from you. I feel like I kind of have that with the map making because I'm dealing with commission clients and I'm, you know, have the live streams where I can see you guys when you come each week and stuff like that. I think it might be good for me to try and find some kind of community like that for my writing. So that could be cool. I'm not sure how you go about finding something like that, but it will be an adventure to find out. Man, I just don't love the density of trees done with this style of pen. It's amazing how much pen weight can really change things. The thing about Discworld for me is that inevitably I want to start reading it out loud. And Dave's never read them, so I'll start reading it out loud. And he'll be like, I need way more context from this quote to understand why this is funny. And then when you go back and you try to pin down like where the joke starts, it's usually so much farther back. Like Pratchett was a master of the subtle lead up. And he's a comic genius. I honestly don't know that I'm ever going to encounter another writer like him. Like, I hope I do. Like, I legitimately hope I do because it was such a joy reading those books. Douglas Adams kind of has some of the same, like, absurdist humor, but I didn't find his humor quite as smart, if that makes any sense. And what I loved about Pratchett was he was just such a brilliant satiricist. Like, and I'm always learning something new every time I reread one of the books. Like, I forget what book it's in. Maybe it's a Mead Hall, or sorry, maybe it's Weird Sisters. He's got a passage in there about, like, it's not even a passage, it's a two-line throwaway about these people idea flashing through like a sparrow in a mead hall. And I didn't really understand it and kind of blew by it the first couple of times that I read it. And then I was taking one of my classes during my undergrad on the anthropology of religion for my minor. And my prof was telling me about how in the point in time where the Norse were being colonized by Christians, there was a lot of struggle because the Norse didn't have the same kind of concept of the afterlife. Like there was no requirement for Christian salvation because that just wasn't how their cosmology was built. And so apparently a really popular metaphor for trying to explain like the Christian view of the afterlife is that you were a sparrow going through a meat hall. Like you just flew into heaven and everything was perfect there and you never had to leave, kind of thing. And he explained it far better than that. I'm radically oversimplifying, and it probably just doesn't sound correct at all. He'd chastise me for not having all of my facts straight, but I understood the next time I encountered it that that was what Pratchett was referencing, and it just gave me a whole new appreciation because like I said it was like a two-line throwaway. It's a little bit I guess like when you know all of the jokes when you're watching The Simpsons. You get what the references are and it just adds that extra level of oh yeah, like this is funny for reasons other than like the haha moment. So it was really great. Yeah, he did. He just dropped references all over the place. And if you got them, like they just added. And if you, well, I think the joy of him was that even if you didn't get them, it didn't disturb your enjoyment of the story. I don't think he ever like really spoke down to his audience at any point. It was just kind of a here's the thing, if you find it awesome, if you don't, that's also okay. And I like that too. Like I feel like that's an incredible skill, first of all, but also a kind of generosity on his part. So that was really cool. I have actually a Josh Kirby cover on my phone. It's Death standing in the library at the Unseen University with all of the books on chains, and Death of Rats is hanging out. I'd show you, but I'm using the phone to film this right now. My reaction was like, hey, go grab the phone so you can show people your case. And I'm like, wait a second, that's the camera. That's not gonna happen. Squeak! Exactly. What's L space? I don't know about L space. Educate me, Brian. I'm assuming it's like a Pratchett fan site or something, given the reference to the Unseen Library's filing practices. The archive. Oh. I'm gonna have to look this up. I have all of them now. lspace.org. Okay, cool. Thank you. This might be like my new favorite resource. What was your favorite Pratchett book, Brian? Night Watch. That's fair. What's mine? I really, really liked Small Gods. Back when I was still dead sure that teaching at the university level was what I wanted to do, I really wanted to do a class on religion and humor. And I wanted to teach Small Gods, like as a novel study, Christopher Moore's Lamb, and oh, what was the third one now? I mean, I understand that asking for novel studies from university students is a huge ask, but they're such important books for how they deal with the topic. And I thought it would be great. Oh, Feet of Clay, if we were going to double up on project commentary on religion, Feet of Clay was amazing. So, yeah, that would have been like a dream class for me. And I probably would have supplemented it with like various other things, but novel studies are not super common in universities. I get why we do them in high school far more. It's just you have more time, but I think critical reading is just such an important skill. And when I was marking and stuff during my master's program, it's very obvious to me that a lot of the students, particularly a lot of entry level students, aren't getting the kind of critical reading skills that they need in high school. And I think that's part of the reason why like news cycles are becoming problematic and stuff. Because people just don't know how to evaluate the sources that they're being confronted with. And texts are important. I think a lot of us have unconsciously internalized the fact that if it's on paper, it's true. I know that I struggled with that for a long time. So I think being able to kind of get yourself around the fact that it might not be, and then be able to tell for yourself so you're not relying on someone else dictating to you, it's a pretty useful life skill. Feet of Clay was the golems, and the basically golems just getting emancipation and becoming their own people, owning themselves. It was just a really fabulous commentary on kind of like robotics in some way, like what happens when you start giving machines rights, as soon as they can prove to you on some level that they think. And also, like, there was just commentary on like what it means to be made versus born, and a bunch of other things. It's kind of a little bit of a blur for me now too. I haven't read it in the last 2 years, so typically I kind of cycle through Pratchett on a regular basis. Every now and then it's just like, you know what I need? This one. I like the Night Watch books quite a bit. I think Commander Vimes is one of my favorite representations of what it means to be an authority. I think that Pratchett showed that with a lot of sensitivity through that character. And I heard that there was supposed to be a TV series of Night Watch coming. At least I think it was Night Watch. I'd have to look that up again. If it is, that'd be awesome. I really enjoyed the version of Hogfather that came out. We tend to watch that every Christmas. Hogfather is another one that's my favorite. I really enjoy that book. There's just some really interesting philosophical questions about that. Plus, I love Death. Like, he's just one of my favorite characters from that whole universe. I love the idea of this anthropomorphized creature that is obsessed with humans. So amusing. There's a screen adaptation of Going Postal? Like, for real? Also, Brian, are you excited about Good Omens? Because I'm excited about Good Omens. Huh, I did not know about Going Postal. I am gonna have to go look that up because I love Moist. Moist is amazing. I'm so stoked for Good Omens. I follow Neil Gaiman on Instagram, and when he was posting like all of the details from the set, I was just over the moon. Way too excited for my own good. Yeah, I'm gonna have to too. I haven't read it in a while. I got to see Neil Gaiman speak in, I think it was November. He actually was brought in by the Edmonton Public Library as part of their forward thinking speaker series, and I made the 400-kilometer round trip to go and sit in the audience. And it was awesome. And he talked a lot about the Good Omens and it coming out, and he talked a lot about Terry actually, which was wonderful. And he did a reading from Good Omens for us, which was really cool. I guess we were the first audience that he's ever read Good Omens for, which felt kind of great. I realize it's incredibly arbitrary and he just made this decision, but I liked the fact that I was there. That was cool. He writes by hand, hey? He is. He's so charming. There's so many YouTube lectures of him doing like convocation speeches and interviews and stuff like that, and sometimes I just throw them on and listen to him. He's brilliant. He's just absolutely brilliant. But he writes by hand. Like somebody in the audience asked the question of like, how do you deal with writer's block? And he said, I don't type. I pull out one of these, and he opened his jacket and he had three shiny pens on the inside pocket. And he said, and I just put a pen to paper and I go. As long as I'm going forward, I'm making it happen. He said, if I do it on a computer, I end up editing as I go and I make very, very little progress. And I do write on a computer because I can frequently type faster than I can write. And I've got nerve damage in my hands. So some of it's an economy of effort thing. I want to be able to keep drawing, so I try to take the load off with other tasks. So, but he's totally right. Like, there are days when I do write by hand, and it's a very different process than typing. Very, very different process than typing. I'm terrible for editing as I go. It's a habit I really, really wish I could break myself of. That's an academic habit, just from having tight timelines. This needs to be basically perfect the first time out of the gate kind of thing. I wish I'd never gotten into it. It's really hard to break now. I've thought about a typewriter. I wonder how that would work for me. Myrna has one. I know she's not here now, but I've never asked her if she does any long form typing on that. I know she's a huge fan of writing by hand as well. So, progressing quite merrily on these islands, you guys. Excited. Brian, I am looking into how to do the VoIP. Oh, right. First drafts are the worst. Um, I'm not a drafter. I'm compile all of my research very, very carefully, put it into areas where the quotes I've picked are kind of linked together, and then just write it, and then revise it afterwards. But like, I'm not huge on revisions either. So like, my research is usually pretty immaculate, and I have an idea of what I want to do, and then I just do it, and kind of usually I'm fairly satisfied with that result. It's terrible because it sounds like I don't try, which, I do try. I just think my process is different from a lot of people's. I've had to change that as I've gone into fiction because there's no. You're writing for flavor with fiction, you're not writing for academic accuracy. So the research portion, where I would do a lot of my thinking and my kind of getting everything straight in academic writing, doesn't really exist to the same degree with fiction writing. So I'm finding the drafting process is just so much more important writing Halcyon. Just I try to write it as best I can the first time, but I know when I have permission in my brain already to come back to it later and make it better. So it's super fun. What would be great? I missed it. What did I say? Yeah, it could be. You're right. I'm a little more precious about writing. The VoIP thing, yeah, no, for sure. I was hoping to have it sorted out today. but I'm not technologically adept. And it was Nicole's birthday yesterday, and I needed to bake a cake and make a lasagna because that's how birthdays go over here. I'll put a picture up on my Instagram of I drew her character, one of her characters for our current D&D campaign for her birthday, and it turned out pretty well. I just couldn't share it because she's on my Instagram, so that would have defeated the purpose. But yeah, the VoIP thing I really do want to try. I was wondering about like should we do like a Discord so people can post their own work as they're going and stuff like that. I put the question up on my Patreon, but I haven't had any responses yet. So if you have an opinion, give me your opinion because I'm dying to know. I like the idea of like a little corner of the internet where we're hanging out and doing things. Yeah, you totally need to write crap first. I read somewhere that you need to write 1,000,000 words of crap before you start writing well. I'm secretly hoping that my master's thesis counted for a chunk of that because the whole thing is just, I don't know, it's not crap. It's fine. I defended, I succeeded, it's good. But like, I read it back now and I go, wow, this sounds really pretentious. Just as a first draft, totally. Totally, totally. I can see the difference in my style of writing and in the quality of writing from when I first started writing Halcyon, which was September of, was it 2017? Yeah, it must have been, because Charles was in Latvia, to now. Like when I go back and read the early drafts now, it's just kind of like, oh yeah, okay. I can see where I was stilted and I can see where I was being kind of tropish. And I'm doing a lot better with it now, so. I'm terrible for like wanting to polish as I go though. I really am. Like that's the perfectionist in me. And you're right about the permission. I need to just kind of sit back and be like, you know what? It's allowed to be terrible. You can fix it later. Somehow that's easier with my art than it is with my writing. Probably just because I've internalized so much nonsense from being at school. You can develop some really weird habits when you're trying to impress other people. I guess that's true in life too, not just grad school. Most of these islands are not in fact shaped like real islands. They're not terrible, but they're kind of blobby. I'm gonna have to spend more time refining them. Although, to be fair, like, this is very zoomed out too, and I don't know how many islands don't look blobby in the real world. I need to spend some time on Google Satellite, I think. Right? I wonder if that's like a lesson I missed as a kid, or if it's something that you really only start to sink into comfortably as you age. Because, like, I know my perfectionism has been rampant since I was a kid. And I know where that comes from and I know why it's there. And honestly, I've kind of had to thank it for its service in some ways that probably sounds silly, but it did a lot for me. But now it's a lot of unlearning. And I find that it's getting easier as I get older just because I'm more at peace with who I am as a person. And I'm less hung up on what other people think of me in terms of validating my creative process and my own personhood. So I kind of wonder like how unstoppable we would all be if that was a process that we internalized as children rather than kind of having to refine as adults. I mean, maybe other people don't go through that. It's entirely possible. Maybe that's just me. But there's enough literature out there about creative block and stuff like that that it makes me think I'm probably not alone with it. Well, my darlings, we are past the 1 hour mark by a decent chunk. Is it time to go? I mean, I'm content to sit here. I don't know if other people are content to sit here. But yeah, I'm gonna keep looking into the VoIP thing, Brian, because I think it would be just cool to be able to hang out with people in voice. I think it would help the flow of the conversation a little bit too, because I wouldn't be like having to periodically look up. All right, so I think if you and I are both going, then we'll call it. I will for sure be back next Thursday. I might do another one between now and then, just because I've got work to do, and it's nice to kind of set up and do the thing. So, all right. Yeah, right? I like, and that's the whole point of an art jam is just getting together and all bring something that we're working on and hang out and work. Myrna's actually doing, she's doing in-person art jams in Edmonton now once a month. So I've been driving in for those too, and it's been pretty great. Oh, hey, Eric. At least I assume you're my Eric. Um, oh no, I think we just lost the stream. My computer says it's spooling. Um, well, I'm glad you enjoyed listening. That's really cool. You're usually lurking. Oh, well, that's exciting. Now I know who my lurker is. I like knowing. All right, my loves. I am going away. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. I will try and figure out this VoIP thing, like I said. And I will hopefully have more updated on this map. Hopefully, we're moving east by next time, because wouldn't that be something? All right, I'm gonna go. You guys take it easy. Catch you later.